Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Oui, Madam Speaker, let me at the very outset thank all the members of this House who have participated in the debate of the budget. I've taken note of their views. I might have to repeat a few things, but I will try to respond to them. I will want to explain the rationale behind the budget. I think the Deputy Prime Minister has actually put it in a nutshell, exactly, focused on this. But laissez-moi aussi remercier la population qui, dans sa grande majorité, ne regardez pas ceux qui écrivent sur Facebook, hein, il y a une machine au Centre-Est. Des gens qui sont payés, une équipe qui ont envoyé, et certaines personnes croient. Comme si c'est la majorité des gens. Non, la majorité de la population, je leur remercie, comprend dans quelles difficultés nous nous trouvons aujourd'hui à cause de l'irresponsabilité du précédent régime. Les mesures budgétaires que nous avons prises sont nécessaires pour empêcher à ce que notre pays sombre dans le précipice, in the abyss. But the first question that we should be asking ourselves, why the hell are we in that position? People should be asking that question. Why are we having to take difficult decisions, bold decisions? Instead, we could have done like the MSM, print money, spend, give left, right, and center, and everybody would have been happy, as the Deputy Prime Minister just said. But we're socialist parties. We believe in the truth. And we believe in being responsible. Laisse-moi aussi dire, Madame la Présidente, que je déplore le fait que certains aient pu mettre en doute le professionnalisme et l'intégrité des fonctionnaires. Ceux du ministère des Finances surtout, qui ont préparé the State of the Economy, le document. Un document basé sur des données crédibles et non des chiffres cuisinés comme l'ancien gouvernement faisait. These are, what can I say, invidious innuendos, des petits innuendos, comme le DPM m'a bien dit tout à l'heure. Une fausse news et puis des choses. Tout à l'heure, le ministre Shakil Mohamed a dit, comme si je suis allé acheter une voiture. Une personne a dit 57 millions hein, en passant. Donc c'est plus qu'un Rolls Royce. Et tout ça, c'est faux. Au contraire, j'ai refusé. Il fallait changer là. J'ai refusé. La voiture officielle que je voyais, je dis PNC, je le dis aujourd'hui, c'était même tombé en panne. J'ai dû changer de voiture en chemin. Mais je refusais de changer de voiture. Et je dois dire que les fonctionnaires n'ont travaillé sur aucune pression. Il y en a qui sont là. Aucune pression. Ou contrainte politique. Non, ce n'est pas notre méthode. Et je suis fier. Je suis fier du travail qu'ils ont accompli. Je suis fier. Madam Speaker, on the 5th of June, I introduced a bold, what I call a strategic budget that puts the country first, above party lines, and not political maneuvering, demagogy, and populism like the MSM has done. Madame la Présidente, je ne veux pas répéter tout ce que j'ai dit. J'ai fait des statements ici. Je ne veux pas répéter tout ça. Mais prenons juste deux chiffres. Deux chiffres. Celui du déficit budgétaire. 9,8% du PIB. C'est-à-dire 70 milliards de roupies. Et cette dette publique, 90% du PIB, c'est-à-dire 642 milliards de roupies. Nous savons tous maintenant que l'ex-ministre des Finances, M. Sabat Dedeu, c'est pas Dedeu, Sabat Monipicoli, il avait annoncé un déficit budgétaire, mais de 3,4% du PIB. Cela fait 26,8 milliards de roupies. C'est-à-dire presque 3 fois moins que le vrai chiffre. Une différence, tenez-vous bien, de 43,2 milliards de roupies. Madam Speaker, many people have no idea how precarious the situation is if you allow the budget deficit to increase and you increase public debt. They have no idea. And you have so much debt, in fact, that you won't even be able to pay. All your money will go in paying interest. And you'll go bankrupt. Like the Deputy Prime Minister said, like what happened in Greece. They went bankrupt. People lost their houses, lost their jobs, and lost their pensions. This is what we are looking at. L'honorable Reza Outim, il a très bien expliqué dans son discours. Dans un langage simple, il a pris l'exemple, il a cité l'exemple d'une famille qui gagne 25 000 roupies comme salaire mensuel et qui commence à dépenser un peu plus que 25 000 roupies. Il a donné cet exemple, je trouve que c'était un très bon exemple. Parce que la famille dépense plus qu'il gagne, commence à prendre des emprunts. Et maintenant, on doit payer les intérêts sur les emprunts. Et graduellement, vous rentrez dans une spirale infernale. Vous ne pouvez plus payer. Vous commencez à recevoir des lettres, la maison est saisie, vous perdez votre emploi, c'est la faillite. C'est pour une famille, mais c'est la même chose pour un pays, seulement sur une plus grande échelle. C'est la même logique. Madame Speaker, Madame la Présidente, le déficit budgétaire, les médecins qui sont là vont comprendre, c'est comme la tension artérielle. Votre tension monte graduellement. 100, 110, 115, 120, 140, 200. Oh là là. Boum. Vous ne réalisez pas que la tension monte. Vous savez, il y a des gens, Maurice, les médecins vont comprendre, qui croient qu'ils ne prennent pas leurs médicaments, ils pensent qu'ils vont prendre quand la tension va monter. Et quand vous demandez, mais comment vous savez la tension va monter? Mais dis non, j'ai eu mal à la tête à l'heure hier. High blood pressure is a symptomless disease. It's a misnomer to say that you're getting headache, you know your blood. It's a silent killer. And then what happens? You suddenly get a stroke, vous êtes paralysé, ou bien vous avez un arrêt cardiaque. Peut-être on a le temps de vous amener dans un ICU, comme c'est le cas à Maurice, ou bien probablement vous perdez votre vie. This is what a rising budget deficit does. Because when you rise the budget deficit, you're rising the public debt at the same time. So you get into the same spiral infernal, which leads to bankruptcy. You should never, never allow the budget deficit to get into double digits. But here, the budget deficit is 9.8%. So, not very far from being a double digit. Not very far at all. And as I said, a rising deficit means a rising public debt. As stated in the statement I made, our public debt is up 90% of GDP. They had forecast, manipulating figures, they had forecast 71.9% of GDP. That is 574 billion rupees. But in fact, it is 642 billion rupees, 90%. Let me remind the House, those in the Labour Party will know, when we left office, we had rigor. You know, I had an advisor who was the advisor of the former Conservative Prime Minister, Lady Thatcher, Alan Walters. I took him because he's a good economist. And when he left, he told me, at least people won't be saying that you mismanaged the economy. Our public debt was below 60%, 59.1%, which is the normal European red line. Not all of them follow it, but it is that. What they did here, they increased it from 60% to 80% by statute. And then they themselves did not follow the line. They did not respect what they had put in statute. They brought it to 90% of GDP. Now, 90% of GDP debt, you know what it means? Debt servicing at 21.8 billion rupees. Notre revenu est à peu près 180 milliards. Donc 21,8 milliards, on va payer les intérêts sur nos dettes. C'est l'argent qu'on aurait pu dépenser ailleurs, pour la santé, pour l'éducation. Instead, we are paying the debt, the interest on the debt. 30% de notre revenu pour payer les intérêts sur la dette qu'ils ont accumulée, eux. Et pour donner l'illusion que tout est bien, tout est en rose, qu'est-ce qu'ils font? Ils obligent la Banque de Maurice, the Central Bank, d'imprimer des billets, 180 milliards de roupies de billets, pour donner de l'argent, nous les avons su, à leurs proches, à leurs amis, copains, copines, comme cadeau. Et comme cadeau avant les élections. This is what the MSM regime did to the people of this country. We should not forget this. We should never forget this. This was a criminal, reckless management of the economy, just to hang on to power and to continue, of course, to steal and to loot the country. That is what they're doing, that's what they have been doing. They remind me of the Pied Piper, those who know the story. He took his flute, played nice tunes, everybody followed until they all fell in the precipice. That's exactly what he did. C'est ça la trahison, la vraie trahison du MSM envers le peuple mauricien. You know, I'll tell you a story, I will try to stick to my time, there's no limit, but I know. You know, before the election, we had fought the election separately, 2019. But they reached a point that I met the Deputy Prime Minister. And there's one question I asked him if he remembers. I said, you have been Prime Minister, I have been Prime Minister. Are you agreeable with what is happening to this country? Of course he didn't agree. Then I said, but we can't sit and let it happen to Mauritius. Because we're both patriots. We can't let this happen. This is how. And thank heavens we did. It is, I asked myself, we ask ourselves, is it conceivable? I remember you asked me that question. Is it conceivable that the ex-Minister of Finance, Mr. Padiachi, or the former Prime Minister, Mr. Pravin Jagannath, that's the way we should call him, did not know? They didn't realize what they were doing, you think? Irrevocably pulling the country towards a precipice and bankrupting the country? Were they economic illiterates? They didn't understand anything about economics. They should have gone and bought, these series for dummies for economics. They should have bought and bought one and see a bit. C'était deux illettrés économiques qui s'en foutaient des Mauriciens et du pays. Pour eux, ce qui était important, c'est s'enrichir et s'agripper au pouvoir. This was the objective. Voilà la réalité. Distribuer de l'argent qui n'était pas l'argent pour rester au pouvoir. This is the naked truth about the MSM. They committed what I can call economic vandalism. This is what they did. Des vrais voyous aux commandes du pays. But thank heavens, the people, in spite of giving them all these gifts, cadeaux, jobs, money, threats, all this, in spite of that, the people booted them out because the people knew what they did not know or did not care to know. The people knew that there is no such thing as a free lunch. It doesn't exist. You cannot defy economic gravity with impunity. Basic economics are. You know, there's a saying, I don't know why they don't know this, when you are fallen into a hole, the first thing you do, stop digging. They continue to dig. You know, like the Deputy Prime Minister said, I shudder Had the people not voted for our alliance, what would have happened to this country? I dare not think. It would have been exactly, we didn't compare notes, huh? But I wanted to say the same thing. It would have been exactly what happened in Greece, what happened in Sri Lanka, the same way. In Greece, people again lost their jobs, as I said, pensions, houses. And Greece, as the Deputy Prime Minister pointed out, Greece had the advantage that we don't have. First of all, the bigger country, the advantage of being in the European Union with the central bank, European Central Bank, behind them, trying to help. But in spite of this, they paid the dire consequences of what they did, of the previous government did. This is exactly what would have happened to us, to all Mauritians. This is exactly what would have happened. Not only the previous government took away our liberty and freedom, and there's no such thing more precious than liberty. And people understood this. They voted avec la rage. Vous avez vu? But ils ont aussi confisqué l'État mauricien. As I say, had we not taken over, me, the DPM, you, the whole population would have been dead by now, economically, I mean. Madame la Présidente, j'ai parlé du déficit budgétaire de cette dette publique. Mais, je vous ai dit, je ne veux pas répéter tout, ça sinon ça sera trop long, mais chaque semaine, à travers les questions parlementaires, bien pertinentes, certains d'entre vous, de nos backbenchers, et je dois les féliciter, nous découvrons les frasques du gouvernement MSM, mais c'est acolyte. La liste est trop longue pour répéter. Il y a d'autres orateurs qui ont répété d'ailleurs, qui l'ont redit. Mais ce n'est pas juste la dette publique, c'est ce qu'ils ont fait aussi. But it's clear, Madam Speaker, that we had to take the bull by the horns and take the difficult but essential measures to steer the state ship out of this wreckage and bring it out in the open sea, calm open sea. That's why we say from abyss to prosperity. But as the Deputy Prime Minister said, that is also I don't understand. Our mandate is 5 years. We have inherited a mess. It will take time. Rome was not built in one day. Who doesn't know this? This is why, like the Deputy Prime Minister, I also ask people to show solidarity. Let's do the right things. There will be a sacrifice, not forever. For maybe 2 years, 3 years, a bit more, we'll see. But let me make it very clear, there is no other option. Madam Speaker, as I'm addressing the issue of public debt, I also want to say, to disprove this false accusation made by the opposition about the increase in public sector debt for the past 7 months. They said it, you will see it, the MSM chatwas at SunTrust writing, then you see a member of the press take it up and they start believing. The leader of the opposition has been saying, malevolently I think, accusing the government of increasing public sector debt by 96 billion rupees over that period we have been in power. At the same time, the former finance minister, he is claiming that since we assumed office, the public sector debt has increased by 66 billion rupees. So, which is which? Their estimates are different, clearly fraud. They could not even agree between themselves what is the figure. And they're placing the blame for the rise in the public debt on the government. They conveniently forget completely, they ignore the fact that we are actually still executing a budget they themselves presented. Their budget ends at the end of June, 30th of June of this year. This is what they're doing. This is the increase in debt. Except what we had done, we had to pay the 14th month bonus to the maximum of people that we could, and then we had to put this salary compensation. The public sector debt will increase from 586.4 billion rupees from September 2024 to 642 billion rupees at the end of June of this year. As I said, the only thing we did was to add this 8.4 billion rupees for the 14th month bonus and the 2025 salary compensation. These were two measures we had promised. We did not know when I met the Deputy Prime Minister when we were appointed. We did not know. We knew there were messaging figures. It was obvious. People have resigned from official positions because they refuse to cooperate and manipulate figures. I won't mention names. Some took early retirement. But we knew that this was happening. We didn't know the extent. So we took this as a caring government. We decided, in spite of that, we will pay this 14-month bonus. 90% of people got it. And the compensation salary, because there has been massive depreciation of the rupee, and inflation was double-digit. And we had promised to try to bring prices down. So this is what we did. The bulk of the increase in public sector debt was due to that irresponsible fiscal stewardship of the previous government. It's staggering 85% of the 55.6 billion rupees, 85% of the rise in public sector debt is attributable to them. And I don't have to tell people, everybody knows that they had overstated revenues, underestimated significantly expenditures, all aimed at creating the illusion everything is rosy, everything is fine. And as a result of this disastrous decade of fiscal mismanagement, government public sector debt has increased from 59.5% to 90% of GDP, which is a dramatic increase, 30% percentage points. Madam Speaker, let me now address this issue that has been raised, this basic retirement pension. As the Deputy Prime Minister said, who wants to become unpopular and try to do something that won't please people? Who? But you have to think of the country first, not yourself. First of all, we have said it is a non-contributory pension. Many people don't. For example, they speak about MPs. These are contributory pensions. You pay every month. This BRP is non-contributory. Non-contributory means that the beneficiary doesn't contribute anything, but he receives a pension. And how do we pay for it? It is paid from the national budget, taxpayers' money, government borrowing. And such all increases in the amount of BRP can only be financed either through higher debt or higher taxes. There is no other way. There is no magic bullet. Second, the cost of the BRP payment has become explosive. BRP spending in Mauritius has soared. In 2010, it was 1.9%. It reached 7.8% in 2024-2025. Expenditure just on basic retirement pension is going to be 55.4 billion rupees this year. As I said in Parliament, Madam Speaker, it is rare for a country to provide old age pension to all persons who are 60, irrespective of their income or assets. And it is a pension, as I said, it is non-contributory. Mauritius is a very rare case. The DPM just said France is increasing. In France, they're going to try it. It's 64, they want to increase it again. Germany wants to make it 70. In most countries, Seychelles. Yes, the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned Seychelles. In most cases, it is contributory, mean tested, and in our case, it is universal with no eligibility test. Third point that I need to make, demographic pressures. They are aggravating the cost implication of the year. Mauritius is facing a rapidly aging population. Rising population, declining birth rate. You don't have to be a great mathematician to understand what is happening. The population aged 60 and over has grown substantially from 186,400 in 2015 to 257,600 in 2024. And it is expected to reach 315,000 by 2030. As a result, the cost of the basic retirement pension on the government budget will then exceed 100 billion rupees. Do people realize what it means? Fourth, with this trend, demographic trend, the ratio of the working age population per retiree is plummeting. This means fewer workers are supporting more retirees. This obviously will have to place because I explained how do we pay this BRP. And with the decrease that fewer workers are going to support more retirees, in other words. And fifth, a budgetary crisis is looming. The BRP expenses now, unbelievably, people don't realize this. It outstrips the combined budget of health and education. And possibly the same, you could put housing, part of housing in it. In the last 14 years, spending on pension has ballooned to a staggering, believe it or not, 828%. In only 4 years, from 2020 to 2021, 2020 to 2024, it almost doubled to 27.9, from 27.9 billion to 55.4 billion. 828%. Une augmentation de 828%, Madame la Présidente. This is why we say it's unsustainable, not just us. Go and see, every expert is saying it. Largely due to ballooning pension liabilities. We are already experiencing actual deficits of 51.4 million in the state statutory bodies' pensions funds. This constitutes a contingent liability, which we again will weigh on the public finance. Madam Speaker, the writing has been on the wall for a long time. Let me quote the former Finance Minister, Pravin Jagannath, then Minister of Finance. Let me quote what he said. He said, I'm quoting, a number of reports have questioned the long-term sustainability of the basic retirement pension, especially as our population is fast aging and the BRP is fully funded out of government revenues. Budget speech 2004 to 2005, unquote. Madam Speaker, in the draft report of a technical committee on pensions, pension reforms, under the MSM regime in February of 2018. This is what they said, and I quote again. Given the progressive aging of the population, existing pension plans are fiscally unsustainable. They themselves say this, their own report. But the MSM ignored all the warnings. Why? For pure political reasons. That report recommended a number of reforms to be brought to the pension system. All of them totally ignored for sheer political and lack of courage, no guts to take the right decision for the country. They knew the patient was in the ICU. They knew what the prescription was to get him out of the ICU, but they didn't have the guts to do the right thing. they did not prevent the patient from going into a coma. This is what they did. As far back as 2015, I got the report out, I read it. The IMF, in an expert report, projected that by 2050, expenditure on BRP would be at an unsustainable level of 8% of GDP. They say that in their report. But because of the irresponsibility of the previous government, we have already reached 7.8%. They predicted by 2050 it will be 8%. Already, 2025, we are 7.8%. That is, we are 25 years ahead of what the IMF had projected. Do you realize what this means? The report of the World Bank in 2021, Mauritius through the eye of a perfect storm. And I quote, it says, the bulk of social spending is more than 50%. This is currently on the basic retirement pension, which is increasingly costly, poorly targeted, and creates adverse labor market incentives. End quote. You know the World Bank, let me quote something else, say something else. It says Mauritius is a rapidly aging society, which will lead to a rapid growth of spending on the basic retirement scheme, pension. And it has the potential for squeezing out pro-poor spending. And of course, it doesn't say this, but I'm quoting, it also says, it's also clear that it will crowd out other investments. The CSG tax, in spite of that clear evidence they had, in spite of the repeated warnings they got, in spite of the plea that we must do the reform, the previous government swept it under the carpet. They even made it worse through their reckless policies, notably by introducing this famous contribution sociale généralisée. The CSG was introduced in September 2020, replacing the National Pension Fund, which was established in 1976 through the vision of SSR. It operated as a contributory, let me remind the House, it was a contributory funded scheme. Both employees and employers made mandatory contributions. And these were prudently, not invested anywhere, prudently invested, just to ensure their long-term sustainability and to provide retirement benefits linked to the individual contributions. In contrast, this CSG, it was designed to pay as you go. It wasn't invested, pay as you go. So they pay out the benefits immediately. No direct link between what the individual contributes and what he or she ultimately receives. It has revealed very early on, it has revealed deep structural weaknesses that now threaten the very foundations of our pension system and the fiscal health of our nation. First and foremost, there has been a diversion of the CSG revenue that they were getting toward non-pension related expenses, just for political expediency. Nothing to do with pension. Then they failed to secure retirees, so they added 9 billion rupees to the government deficit this fiscal year. 9 billion. No projections, no policy change, but greater liabilities. Let us be clear, the CSG, we said this when we were in opposition. I know the MMM also said it, maybe our other friends said it, I don't know. We all said that the CSG is a regression and it is a tax. Yes. That's what it is. Unlike the NPF, the CSG is not managed by any independent fund. So it is vulnerable to political abuse and fiscal mismanagement. And we have witnesses, we've seen examples. It undermines the principle of ring fencing pension assets for the exclusive benefit of the retirees. That is what has happened. And the absence of a funded reserve in the context of a budget deficit that today's contributions, CSG contributions, are immediately spent, they leave nothing for tomorrow for the retirees. The model is clearly unsustainable. Is it a pension? It is a tax. Under the CSG, there is no direct relationship at all between what the individual pays and what he receives or she receives in retirement. Therefore, what happens? This discourages savings, erodes public trust in the system, which it has, and worse, the former Minister of Finance, I don't know how this happened, somebody asked him a question, he ended up saying, well, there is no money at all in the CSG now, completely depleted. And this has forced government to finance pensions directly from the budget. What happens? It adds to the public debt, crowding out, as I said, other essential expenditures. And this, people don't realize, and this is what has happened, it has placed the entire pension system at the mercy of politicians and fiscal constraint. Therefore, there's nothing predictable for our elderly. It is a failed policy, that CSG. Like most of the policies of the previous government, all have failed. And it has failed to resolve that essential challenge of pension sustainability. In fact, it has compounded the problem, placing our seniors, our public finances, our social fabric in jeopardy. This is what it has done. Therefore, this is why we must urgently reconsider this system, restore independent contributory pension funding, and ensure that the sacrifices of today's workers are not squandered for short-term political gain. That is what we must do. Even what the reserves that are left in the NPF, this also will be eventually exhausted while we are taking bold decisions that should have been taken, as I said, a long time ago. Ils ont le culot, comme a dit le Deputy Prime Minister et aussi, je crois, certains autres ministres. Ils ont le culot d'aller manifester avec les travailleurs. Ces mêmes travailleurs dont ils ont dévalisé les pensions. Oui, André Valide, tu as raison. You know, they are like these maggots who come out of dead bodies. But at least the maggots are eating the dead bodies for eating. These people, these maggots, is for greed. That is why they're there. Real maggots. It reminds me of a well-known Bhojpuri expression. Kal ke gunda, aaj ke sadhu.
Translation.
Yesterday's hooligan is as if today's angel. We are seeing the emergence of political strikes without an iota of self-respect, wringing out of the stingholes, and they're trying to reclaim their long-lost political virginity. That is what they're doing. C'est même Botou, Madame la Présidente, reconnus par la population comme étant les fossoyeurs de l'État-providence, ont aujourd'hui le toupet de venir dire que ce budget, c'est la fin de l'État-providence. Comment dire Ali Baban bin Robin des Bois. C'est un peu le créole, Madame la Présidente, un petit bout. This is why the Deputy Prime Minister said, we will not shudder from our decisions. And I tell you frankly, I think about it. We have a dream team. I've said it many times. It is the luck of this country that myself and the Deputy Prime Minister are there, together with our friend and Richard Duval. You know, I think I need to say this. The Deputy Prime Minister, leader of the MMM, has been a finance minister. And I tell you something, I wasn't in politics at the time, but I followed. And SSR followed. He also agreed. He took the hard decisions then in 1982, in spite of 2 devaluations from Sabira Samiringadu, who was Minister of Finance. I even discussed this with him. And you know what he said? Maybe the former Prime Minister will agree. He said to me, the mistake we made, we should have devalued by more the first time. But again, probably pressure, political pressure, they devalued by less, they had to re-devalue again, and this is what happened. And Honourable Paul Béranger took the decision that had to be taken. I think you spoke to the IMF came. Had he not taken those decisions, you know, this is the, what can I call it? Hein? C'est pas la vie. This is the paradox.
Maybe le taqdir, maybe taqdir.
This is the paradox. He takes the difficult decisions. He was pilloried on a communal basis because the decision was difficult. Not everybody could have taken it. He could have taken it, but not everybody would have taken it. He was pilloried and they turned it into a communal argument. And then they claimed, they collected the fruits and they said, je suis le père du miracle économique. C'est lui le véritable père du miracle. I tell you, I really believe it. It is the destiny of this country.
That's it.
It's as if God's hand is showing us the way that we had to come in at this time. You know, I remember what Churchill said. Churchill had all these difficulties, but he was a great orator. When he became eventually Prime Minister, he said, I'm walking as if my whole life was preparing me for this moment. And I tell you, this is the moment that we have to be there together as one to save that country, otherwise we are dead. And we are going to do what we can do. We are socialists. We, both parties, the Résistance and Alternative as well, and we're happy they are with us. Nouveau démocrate, peut-être pas trop, mais un peu. We were born in the opposition, fighting for those who had no voice, the voiceless of this country. Both parties. I was telling this the other day to my good friend Ashok Subon. We started that way, and then being pragmatic, like what happened in Sri Lanka, we moved a bit to the center. The MMM followed the same. And I'm hoping you will follow. This is why we have done 2 things, Madam Speaker. We have announced in at paragraph 240 in the budget speech that we will set up a committee of experts. We are not experts. We want them to carry out in-depth study of the pension system to come up with a sustainable and fairer system. That is what we want to do. And secondly, Cabinet has agreed. We're naming 2 commissions to look into provision relief. I'm chairing one. My friend Ashok Subon, Honourable Subon, is chairing the other. We are looking at possible relief, if we can, for those who do hard jobs, who are on low pay. There's a principle in taxation. You help those on low income. That is the basic principle in finance. But we will look at all this Those who should have got their pension, they're not probably going to get these two commissions. And we think, I've spoken to the Deputy Prime Minister, I just spoke to my friend, Minister Subon, that maybe in the interest of time, eventually, soon, we should merge these two commissions together so that we can come to rapid decisions, because it is a very, very difficult situation. Madam Speaker, we are a small island state, vulnerable to global geopolitical and economic events. Our history is fraught with examples of how we have combated the tyranny of both history and geography to shape our destiny. You mentioned, the Honourable Jitan mentioned the two Nobel Prize economists. You mentioned two, but there are three in fact. Mead and Tismuth, and there is Naipaul as well. No man, Madam Speaker, is an island unto itself. No man. We are all part of the main continent. Our nation too is part of the world. So we cannot be as if shielded from the ripples effects of global events. Current geopolitical tensions in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East. We've seen what is happening in the Middle East. Fortunately, we hope things calm down. We have more frequent natural calamities. You saw what happened in France yesterday. Nobody believed in full summer. The resurgence of trade protectionism are sending shock waves through the international markets, straining supply chains, raising import costs, and especially for us, for our key sectors, food security, energy, they pose fresh challenges to our export-driven industries, to our tourism industry, and overall for our economic outlook. They remind us, Madam Speaker, as I said, no one is an island unto itself. They remind us that our destiny is inextricably linked with the broader currents of global affairs. We are a trading nation, a small country, be it, but we're a small, open economy. We will have to sail through these rough seas and troubled waters. We cannot expect to be totally immune from the adverse effects of global events, but we can be determined and resilient. That we must be. As I stated to the House on Monday, Madam Speaker, let us hope that good sense, wisdom will prevail between that peace, fragile peace agreement between Israel and Iran, and we will get a peaceful, permanent solution to that conflict, because this is very important, extremely important for the stability of the global economy. And precisely because we might be a small island state, but we are not immune to the global effects. I need to also add what the Deputy Prime Minister said about Moody's rating. Why is it important for us? The first thing, as the Deputy, we were discussing this, we didn't compare notes, I can tell you. The first thing that is being misinterpreted, they misinterpret both roles, IMF and Moody's. The Deputy Prime Minister just mentioned it in very clear terms. The IMF has nothing to do with this budget. I don't know who thought of this. The IMF publishes reports on all countries it covers. It is not dictating us what to do. We're not in that position. We have read that. Some countries have. Greece had. Sri Lanka has. Even Great Britain, the United Kingdom, I should say, has at one point in the 70s. This is what we want to avoid this, Madam Speaker. But to escape it, we have to take the measure, the corrective measure that we should have been taking. Because the shipwreck is looming. We cannot, so to speak, cannot ignore what the credit ratings institutions like Moody's do, the report. We cannot ignore the report. Among other things, Moody's issues credit ratings for countries. Why? So that investors are aware of the economic situation in that country and the risk or no risk of investing in that country. That is what it does. Now, let me just clarify something that perhaps people don't follow properly. The highest rating for Moody's is AAA. That is the top notch. And the lowest is CAA3 or C. When that happens, the country is described as the junk status, is given that status. And a downgrade to junk status has dire consequences, as the Deputy Prime Minister said. We must absolutely avoid it. What it means is that we will not honor our debt. More likely we will not honor our debt. That is, if you invest in that country, you might lose. You might not be able to recuperate your money. That is what it means. The country is likely to default on its payments. It means that if this country wants to borrow money abroad, again, they will think twice before giving you any money. I must tell you something that perhaps people don't realize. We ourselves didn't say it enough. When we left government in 2014, you know what our credit rating was? Baa1 stable, which is a very high investment grade, a high grade. It is not the highest, but next to the highest. This is what it is. We left in April 2020. Moody's downgraded Mauritius to Baa1 negative. Not junk, but still a downgrade. A downgrade means what? That you have to correct a few things. You don't continue as if nothing has happened, but they didn't. So in March 2021, 1 year later, Moody's downgraded us again, this time to Baa2 negative. Nothing. As if it's coming through 1 year, going to the other. Passe le jeu de la tête, ça. Vous avez imprimé biaisé. Vous avez compte de l'or. Ça, vous devez faire. Allô? 1 year later, July 2022, again Moody downgraded us to Baa3 this time. Still nothing. Again, what happened in 2024? This has come out in January of this year. Again, Baa3, this time not stable, negative. So, Moody's has degraded Mauritius 4 times during the MSM regime in power, the incompetence and the mismanagement of the economy. 4 times. And they did not react, just like the pension, sweep it under the carpet. You know why? This is why they were surprised. They think whatever they do, when the election time comes, they will do a propaganda. I've been attacked every day on NBC, every day. I'm still here. The Deputy Prime Minister has been attacked. As if he has, no, Béranger. This is what they do when election comes, and they thought that this time this will work as well. But God decided otherwise. They didn't count on this. So they didn't take action, and we are facing this problem. Now, I must say also, Madam Speaker, when a country loses its investment grade, the grade status, and is labeled junk, it can face several economic and financial consequences. People have said briefly, but I want to add a few more. First thing that happens when it becomes junk, higher borrowing costs. A downgrade investment grade means higher risk to investors. Therefore, investors demand higher interest rates to compensate for that risk. And therefore, everything becomes more expensive. Second thing happens that people don't realize, capital outflows. Many institutional investors, they sit in New York, in London, or whatever. They want to make money and profit. They don't come here because they like our beaches and our sea. So when they see what this is happening, I'm talking about pension funds, insurance companies, these are big investors. And they have mandates, they have boards. Not chatwas on the boards, real boards. But they have to answer questions. So they have mandates to invest only in countries that are safe. The result, a downgrade can trigger forced selling countries' bonds, therefore leading to capital flight, and therefore pressure on the currency. What happens? You get depreciation again, because you have reduced investor confidence, capital is outflowing, you get pressure on your rupee, and you get again depreciation. Depreciation means higher cost of imports, and then you fuel inflation. This is what happens. And Mauritius, we are highly dependent on imported goods in foreign currency denominations. Weaker investor confidence means the ratings mean that this country is not sure for economic stability. Therefore, both foreign and domestic investment, they won't invest in the banking sector. Domestic banks, perhaps people don't know this, our domestic banks, they hold large amounts of money in government bonds. This it weakens the balance sheets. Again, this reduces their capacity to lend, and you raise again financial risk in that sector. A downgrade may also reflect concern about fiscal discipline, governance, and macroeconomic stability. Therefore, it erodes trust among investors, trade partners, even citizens. Therefore, the potential for a vicious cycle is there in front of us, staring at us, as the DPM said. It's staring at us now. I'll tell you something. When we won the elections, Modi had already said, just on when you came in, on what they did, we should downgrade us. We made pleas. We sent the chief economic advisor, and I thank him, to talk to them. Give us a chance. Don't downgrade us. We did all the efforts that we had to do. Because otherwise, everybody is affected. Not just the banks. Not just the businessmen. Even the individuals who are here will be affected. This is why we're doing our level best to take all the measures we can to stop the rot. Otherwise, we would slide into economic chaos. Now I ask myself, who in the world, in this country, would want this to happen? Who? Nobody. And I repeatedly said, Madam Speaker, I repeatedly said, je n'ai pas de bâton magique dans ma main. It doesn't exist. Le pays est dans un précipice économique et social. On a reculé de 10 ans. Tout ce qu'on a bâti depuis l'indépendance, depuis 1968, s'était frondé entre 2014 et 2024. Sous les règnes des vautours successifs, des papas petits, des ganates, papa petit, nous ne pays là, on doit des journalistes. But as I said, I am ready to assume all the responsibilities I have to, and so is the DPM. We have a united front. We are all united in this fight because we are patriots and we have to defend this country. Difficult decisions, yes. But we have to take the difficult decisions to let Mauritius become Mauritius again. That is what we have to do. Neither I nor the DPM are doing this to get the community. But in life, you must do what you must do to save your country as a true patriot. Madam Speaker, the doctors again will understand. If the patient has a gangrene, his foot has got gangrene, the surgeon has no choice. He has to chop off the foot to save the patient, otherwise the patient will die. This is exactly what we are doing. It is a difficult choice. This budget is not about austerity, as some people are saying. It is about responsibility. It is not about politics, day-to-day politics, but it is about the prosperity and the well-being of the whole nation, of our youth, of our children and grandchildren of tomorrow. Therefore, let us move forward, Madam Speaker, boldly, with courage, with purpose, with compassion, with confidence, with determination, and leave the proud legacy for future generations. That we must do to save this country. Les défis nationaux et mondiaux appellent à des solutions courageuses, Madame la Présidente, courageuses et innovantes. Et je suis persuadé que la population, dans sa grande majorité, comprend la précarité de la situation. Ils ne sont pas bêtes. Qu'elle fera preuve de solidarité et qu'elle participera à la reconstruction du pays. I also make this appeal as the Deputy Prime Minister did. Even to those who don't seem to understand, please try to understand. There is a reason why everyone here came from different continents and God put us on that small piece of land. It is our duty, because when it rains, it affects us all. When there's a cyclone, it affects us all. Similarly, it doesn't matter who you are. You might be any community, any cause or whatever. You will be affected by the rain, by the sun. So we have a duty to be able to live together and save our country. That is what we are doing, Madam Speaker. I promise in my budget speech, I won't promise to take you to heaven, but I certainly shall prevent you from going to hell. That is what I say. L'histoire, je termine, Madame la Présidente, l'histoire nous jugera sur l'héritage que moi et le Deputy Prime Minister, mais aussi nos partenaires, Résistance et Alternative et Nouveaux Démocrates, laisseront aux générations futures. We are at a crucial point in our history. We are working with destiny. It is our destiny. It was our destiny. It is our destiny to be here now at this point in our history to come and save the nation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.